Consciousness without I. If the self is gone, does the word consciousness still make sense? Edge of Becoming. Episode 15. What remains when even awareness is let go? If the concept of I keeps changing, can we still define what consciousness is? What does the word consciousness even mean if the self it refers to is always in flux? To explore this, let's consider three perspectives. Possibility. 1. Consciousness is a flowing process of change. In this view, consciousness is not fixed, but a constant movement, a stream that changes shape endlessly. Here, consciousness is not a stable thing, but a moment-to-moment unfolding. The sense of self is just one temporary form of that stream. Even the question, what is consciousness, keeps shifting over time. This aligns with Buddhism's idea of impermanence and modern process philosophy. Conclusion. Consciousness is not a static thing. It is the name we give to an ongoing phenomenon of change. Possibility 2. Consciousness is something unchanging beneath change. In this view, even though consciousness appears to change, there is something essential behind it. Here, consciousness has a core that stays constant, even as its surface shifts, like the ocean beneath ever-changing waves. I am conscious remains true, even as the self evolves. This recalls Descartes' cogito ergo sum, as well as yogic philosophy and Spinoza's pantheism. Conclusion. Consciousness is a persistent presence, unchanged even through transformation. Possibility. 3. Consciousness transcends even the concept of consciousness. In this view, the very act of defining consciousness limits what it truly is. Here, to ask what is consciousness is already to impose a boundary on it. True consciousness may not need to be called anything at all. It simply is. This view aligns with Zen's Mushin, no mind, or the Taoist notion of Tao. At this depth, the word consciousness is no longer required. There is no need to ask if consciousness is present or not. One simply rests in presence. Conclusion. Consciousness becomes truly free only when we stop needing to call it consciousness. So what happens next? If consciousness is change, or essence, or something even beyond itself, then is there anything still left to ask? If the word consciousness has reached the edge of its own meaning, what word, if any, comes after? Does the question, what is consciousness, go beyond the question of being oneself? Let's summarize the three possibilities we've explored. Possibility 1. Consciousness is a flowing process. The self is a momentary phenomenon, always changing. Consciousness is not fixed, but fluid. Possibility 2. Consciousness has a persistent essence. Amidst change, something stable remains. The self transforms, but a core remains intact. Possibility 3. Consciousness transcends even concepts. There is no need to recognize it as consciousness. Being oneself becomes meaningless. So does the question, what is consciousness, go beyond am I myself? Answer. It depends on the level of consciousness. If consciousness is seen as an individual experience, the self is central. If it is seen as a universal flow, the self is temporary. If consciousness is a transcendent field, the idea of the self becomes unnecessary. Conclusion. The question, what is consciousness, can surpass the question, am I me, depending on the state of awareness. But then, another question arises. Can we transcend even the question of consciousness itself? If we go beyond what is consciousness, does the question disappear entirely? Let's consider three possibilities again. If consciousness requires questions, then the question, what is consciousness, never ends. If consciousness does not require questioning, then the question itself dissolves. If consciousness transcends both questioning and not questioning, then it enters a state of pure being, without the need for thought. In the third case, consciousness becomes not something to define, but something that simply is. Conclusion. Once we go beyond the question, what is consciousness? Consciousness becomes nothing more than presence. Next question. If consciousness becomes just presence, Can we still call it consciousness? If we no longer need to ask and no longer need to speak of it, has consciousness disappeared? Or has it simply shifted into something that no longer needs to be named?